I'm Cheryl.
And I'm Naima. We're three Black moms.
100 years. Yes, 100 years. Noah was building the ark and warning people at the same time that the floods were coming. And you would think after that long time and those people thinking he was crazy that somebody would have believed him, but nobody did. And those people faced judgment and drowned, and only 8 people survived because they went into the ark. Now, we live in a modern time where we are warned if there is a storm coming, and some people elect to stay behind, board up their homes, and live through the disaster. Sometimes they make it, and sometimes they don't. But people in authority warn us that if a storm is coming, there are certain areas, especially here in Florida, where you live in a flood zone, you may lose power, and you are warned ahead of time that if you don't leave, the rescue people cannot put themselves at risk to come and save you because you would not listen. And there were levees built in New Orleans for years telling people someday this is going to fall apart. And they had a big flood and lives were lost there. And in California with the San Andreas Fault. And people are saying one day part of California is going to float off into the ocean. How serious are these warnings? And how do you determine if you should stay or if you should go? Sisters, what are your thoughts? Can you weather the storm? Is it safe? Should you stay?
Hi. Well, obviously, we're together today. I decided to come home for a weekend. It's funny when I think about this because when I first moved to Boston, I actually moved I came to Boston for the first time during Hurricane Gloria. And I had never been in a hurricane, but I was coming up to try out for a job at the Boston Herald. And I remember being in the hotel and they had shut off all service, and they said, so I had no food to eat, and they had told us to fill up our bathtubs with water just in case the power went out, which I didn't do because I thought that was stupid. But it's funny that you talk about whether or not you should go or stay, and for some people, they didn't have a choice. I mean, I could have postponed my tryout because I just didn't know. And actually, there were people who did get caught in the storm and couldn't come into work. So it was very interesting. And that was my first hurricane because I hadn't grown up in hurricane weather. And looking back, it wasn't as bad as it could have been. But there are people who actually don't have any choices. And so, when we say, oh, these people are stupid because they stayed and, now the rescuers can't get to them. Sometimes if you don't have a car, if you don't have a place to go, it's really tough. And I think there's this feeling of, sometimes if you don't go, it's on you. But other times, I think we worry about our stuff and what we're losing. And Naima, you had made a point when we were saying that sometimes people get really worried about all of their stuff and worried about somebody's going to break in and steal their stuff if they leave it. And when the water's rising, your stuff really doesn't matter.
Well, I think that's the thing that people don't realize until they're faced with that real life and death situation. And all of a sudden you understand my stuff doesn't matter. But we get so caught up on identifying ourselves with our things, our possessions. Oh, about my fur coat. What about all of my mementos? What about my TV? I mean, people don't think until they're faced with the reality that they're about to die. And that's when you realize none of that stuff matters. But a lot of times people will stay behind because they don't want to lose their stuff. But then they don't also realize if you get washed away or burnt away, whatever the case may be, if there's a fire that breaks out because of whatever the weather condition is, and all your stuff is destroyed, then you've lost it anyway. So why are you ready to risk your life to save something that might end up being destroyed anyway? And I think every disaster gives us a chance to evaluate our own values. What would be the first thing I would grab when my house was in danger of either being burnt down or washed away? What would I think of that was most important to save? And I think there was either a game show or something where they asked this question. What would be the first thing you would grab if you had to get out of the house in a fire and you can only take one thing?
Or a couple of things. It's funny because
one. What if you only take one and you had to make a choice?
This is the thing.
That's how come people burn up. They go, I should take this. Oh, maybe that. Oh, maybe
but this is what's funny is that I actually preached on this a couple of weeks ago when I had a message at my church about welcoming the stranger, and we know where that came from because the whole Martha's Vineyard fiasco. Thank you, Barbara, for your governor. But but I said at the time, I said, if you had just 5 minutes to get out of your house, what would you take? And it was easy for me. It's like anything that's breathing gets to come.
Yeah.
That means the husband, the daughter, the dog, the birds. And I said, okay, if I had a couple extra minutes, maybe I would grab some of her baby pictures, the wedding albums, the things like that cannot be replaced, even if, you tried, and those are the things that you think about. But the most important things are anything that's breathing.
Absolutely.
And that's what we forget, is that it's most important to save the live stuff. And the rest of the stuff, okay, if there are wedding photos that I lose, okay, I'm not going to be any less married. If there are baby pictures that I lose, there are going to be plenty.
You still have the baby.
I still have the baby, even though she's not a baby anymore.
Yeah.
So we think of our things for posterity. But it's funny, when we were talking about this last week, and we were saying that this was going to be our subject, and then a few days later, I looked at it and I thought, oh, you know what? This could also be an existential question. Weathering the storm of a lot of things, weathering the storms of a bad relationship. Do you stay or do you go? Weathering, the storms of a bad job. Do you stay or do you go? So we have to really, we started talking about the weather, Barbara, obviously, because, your place had, hurricanes, and, there was Katrina, and there were other really bad storms, and there are more storms coming because of climate change. But we have to think about weathering the storm of our lives.
I think this is also a way people have to start thinking about their decision-making process when something really is over. Are you ready to recognize when it's over, whether, like you say, it's a bad relationship, or whether your house is over, is about to be washed away, and you're clinging to something that is no more, and you need to let go. And so you have to think about, why am I holding on to this if it's time for me to let it go? And sometimes people don't realize that staying is more destructive than leaving. Just like staying in a burning house is destructive, staying in an abusive relationship is destructive. There's no benefit to that. And ultimately, if you don't make the decision in time, then maybe the destruction is irreversible. The destruction to you is irreversible. Say like a bad relationship where somebody's abusive, they become physically violent, and oh, well, he only beats me when he's drunk, or okay.
And so you try to tiptoe around those times
and try to keep them sober.
Yeah, as if you can.
And that's the thing, is that you try to control things that
are uncontrollable.
And are not yours to control, whether it be a relationship or the weather. Is that it's not it's not in your purview to control something else, and it's not in your purview to control the hurricanes. Yeah, you can board up your house and you can do those kind of precautions, but ultimately somebody else is making that decision.
Right. Well, I'm gonna pull up some comments we've got from our
Yeah,
Facebook
good.
audience. And Cheryl, I'll let you read these.
It will be, I think, is that this will only be temporary. This ain't the tornado southern towns.
And who's that?
This is from Eric Kufi James for U.S. State Senate. He must be one of your senators, or
Yeah.
one of these-
Well, I think that it takes a lot of input from professionals when you're talking about relationships and determining if a relationship can be salvaged. Because, yes, there are storms in relationships to be weathered. Now, at some point, when it becomes abusive, and those are defined by many different avenues by many different counselors on how to deal with it. And they're in a place to determine if your health or your safety is at risk. Should you get out, like that movie that we saw where there was danger there, but not everyone saw it? Or should you try and make things work because it is workable or can be workable? Now, in terms of loving your stuff, what is it? This book that I just read called Love People, Not Things. And we place too much importance on things that are perishable, that will not last. Store up your treasures in heaven where moth cannot destroy, where no one can steal. These are things that are eternal, that no one can steal them from you. No one can take these things from you. Stuff that moths can eat or wreck or weather can destroy, that is not the sum of who you are as a person. We are not our things. And I think this book actually talked about how things become cumbersome because you spend more time fixing your things, taking care of your things, worrying about your things, afraid that your things are going to be stolen. And there is less time spent on relationships with other people. People are eternal. You want those relationships to help grow you as a person, and you want to put yourself into that person and invest in the person. You can't invest in stuff, and you can't take any of that stuff with you when you die. So it needs to be relegated to a place of less importance than relationships with people. And I will tell you that people who live here in Florida, who were told that they needed to leave when the weather was going to be bad, and they refused to leave because of all those reasons, Naima, that you named. Oh, someone's going to steal my stuff if I'm gone, or I got to protect my stuff. And what happens is they have placed things above their own lives to their peril if they are in trouble. And usually a person is told in enough time to try to vacate if they need to get out of the city. There was one year when a storm actually did hit our area, but we knew a couple of days ahead of time. We drove on over to Georgia so we could be by Eric's sister for a few days. And granted, she doesn't live in Georgia anymore. She and her husband moved to Hawaii. So I'd be glad to vacate over there.
But that's another thing, though. Sometimes you may not have a place to go if you don't have relatives.
Right.
We got another person who said who they would make sure they got
out.
Yeah,
Jody Susan Calhoun is a woman after my own heart. She says my birds, and she said her birds and her husband. So,
Yeah.
she's right after, she says, I actually have this all set up. And I kind of, in my own way, do too, because I have a little carrier that if I had to stick the birds in, I could stick my two doves in and take them if I had to get them out of the house. It would be funny because they would be going and my husband would not be happy because he hates my birds. But, There are some people that they're afraid of birds. They just have this thing about birds. But
They shouldn't have watched that Hitchcock movie.
well, you know what? I've had birds, longer than I've had a husband. So, and I've had him for 25 years. So I've always had birds.
He still
so,
ranks second. Oh, well.
No, but he always knows that they were here before he was, even if they weren't the same ones. So he knew me with birds.
Okay, so both you and Jody would say the birds and the husband.
Yeah.
She says you can read that one also.
Yeah. Oh my, there are storms in relationships. Yes, exactly.
And that's another thing, staying or going. And what's the next thing?
Peace of mind over peace of peace of mind, PEACE, over peace, PIECE, of anything. Absolutely.
That makes sense. It definitely makes sense. Yes. And I think that's one of the things when you have to make a decision about weathering the storm in a relationship. At some point, you got to be at peace. And if you're never at peace, then why are you staying? What's the point in having a relationship if it's causing you turmoil? And you're not supposed to suffer through life. We are not here to suffer. So you got to think, why am I staying? Is it fear?
Yeah.
Just like, why would you stay when they tell you, well, you got to leave, your house is in the path of the storm. You must evacuate. If you don't leave, what are you staying for? What are you fearing that won't let you leave?
But let's unpack that too, because just like sometimes if you're weathering the storm and there's a hurricane coming and you can't leave because you have no place to go, that can also be in relationships where you feel like you have no place to go.
You don't have anybody
if you don't have anybody who will take you in. If there are a lot of people who are estranged from their family, or maybe they just don't have family and they don't have a place to go. And as one who has been in situations where I did not have a place to go, it's very humiliating and terrible when you have to go to a shelter because you feel like a failure and you don't feel you feel demoralized. So a lot of times people will stay because they're trying to get to the place where they can get someplace where no one knows and no one, because sometimes you have to rescue yourself and you don't know how to get out of that. You have no family close by, or your family says, hey, you're in this relationship, deal with it.
Yeah.
And sometimes
we warned you and you wouldn't listen. So you just stay there.
You keep going back because a lot of times they say it takes, I don't know how many times before people finally leave, like 7 times or something before they finally leave permanently. So, if you keep relying on those same people and then you go back to your abuser, or to say the way we would say, if you're talking about the physical sense, if you keep going back and building in that flood zone, people don't want to take you in. So it's in the emotional sense, in the metaphysical sense, in the actual physical sense. If you keep repeating the same mistakes, people are less sympathetic.
Right. Because they feel
I think that in this day and age, there are a lot more compassionate places that are a little bit more aware of situations where people need to be in some kind of safe place, a safe house, a different kind of shelter. I think more and more as women become bolder in standing up for each other, that more of these places become available to them. You see these in a lot of these television shows, a lot of these news broadcasts.
And a lot of these places have a lot of wait lists too. They're not they're not as accessible as television and even Hollywood will let you will portray. A lot of times they don't have space for you, or they don't have space for your kids, or they don't have, or maybe they have spaces for you and your kids, but they don't have space for your dog. And and those are and that's a real problem, because people who are in abusive relationships don't want to. And this is funny because this is a physical sense too. A lot of times, if you're in an abusive relationship, you can get into a shelter, but they won't take your dog.
Yeah,
And
they
also,
don't have facilities for
if
that.
you have to leave and go to a hotel or a safe place because your house is being flooded, they don't take pets. And and so there's this whole thing of, we are not as good
with animals.
And so a lot of times we weather the storm because we have things that are important for us to keep, and it's not just the stuff.
Yeah.
We weather the storms because I'm not going to leave my animal in a place with someone who may
doesn't
abuse
care as
them,
much about
or
them,
who may abuse them to hurt you.
Yeah, that's crazy. And what else is we got another?
Yes, I have the carrier with easy access. She's talking about her birds. Yes. So
and
and she's had birds since she was 7, so that was 52 years. Yeah. See.
Yeah. So I mean, when you have animals that are part of your family, part of you,
which they should be.
And some people don't realize that if they're not an animal person,
they're not a pet person.
Yeah, then they're like, yeah, you're doing all this for this dog, you're doing all this for this cat, you're doing all this for these birds. But yeah, they're your family, and sometimes they might really be all you have.
And there were a lot of animals that were abandoned, had to be abandoned in all of these storms.
Because there was an organization that was going back to, I think we did that on the newscast. They had to go back and rescue a lot of the abandoned animals who didn't have any water, because there was no drinkable water, and they didn't have food. So you think about that, they're in distress and trying to survive and can't find shelter, can't find food. So yeah, I mean, that's all part of when you leave. Can you take everybody with you that has to go, even the animals?
Yeah.
And like you were saying, even in relationships, when you have to leave and maybe go to a shelter. But if you have somebody who's teenage, a lot of these shelters would not take them.
Especially
so what do you do?
If it's a teen boy,
they
may not touch your son. And it's hard because we have made everything so much harder than it has to be. Right. Obviously, climate change is the reason for the hurricanes and the storms. But because we also know that these are going to happen, we have not put enough things in place to help people weather that storm. We have not encouraged people to not rebuild in that same place. It's like it's like in California where they have the mudslides and people have these magnificent views and they're on these cliffs and the mudslides come and they lose everything. Well, they turn around if they have enough money, they'll rebuild in that same spot. Well, how many times do you have to do that? Some of them can't even get insurance because it's a mudslide territory.
It's gonna slide again.
And so we don't and that had happened in New Orleans too. These people, and there are other places where they're building and they're building them again and again, and they're getting the money instead of saying, you need to find someplace else. Yes, we know you have a beautiful view of the ocean, but you're going to be in it. And you need to not build your house there. And we let people indulge. And then when they are hurt by it, we allow them to indulge again. Yeah. It's like if you have a child that keeps putting their hand on the stove, usually children will remember that first time they get burned and they won't do it again. But these are like people whose child just keeps putting their hand on the stove.
Like one of these days the fire's not gonna be hot.
Yes, exactly. So when we talk about weathering the storms, we have to also prepare. We have to be ready to prepare for the eventual storms.
Yes.
And sometimes in a relationship, you don't see it coming. Maybe you ignore the red flags like some of us did. Maybe the red flags weren't there and they came later. But we have to always be getting ready to go.
Yeah. when you're in a stormy relationship, just have a bag packed.
Yes, yes.
Just-
You start getting ready to go even before you know you're getting ready to go.
Yeah.
So, and that's the same thing with your house. If you're in a zone and someone says, okay, Hurricane Ian or whomever, Katrina or the next one is
or Irma, or they named like 3.
Yes,
exactly.
Exactly. You know, and they get so many storms these days that they run out of names. You know,
well, they'll always have a name.
You know, so
I think we have.
It's another. Yeah, it's the same about the pets. About the huge concern about they don't take pets. Yeah. So you need to make. You have to have a go plan. Like you have to have the water and the thing and the, you know, and the clothes or whatever you're going to need. A kennel for your dog or cat, so that you can transport them safely, so that you know you can have a plan of action. Keep your car gassed up. You hear about a storm coming and you don't turn around and say, well, I think I'm going to just wait till tomorrow to get gas. Go on and get gas now.
Yeah, they'll be out if you do
done that. Morning.
They'll be out. That happened. Well, you know, they actually give you hurricane plans. I would say they do this for everyone who buys a house here, but they send something to you every year. They give you a plan of action. They give you a list of items that you need to have on hand. And actually, I have this conversation with my high school students on preparing for storms and hurricanes. What things do you have? And I remember when we were talking about the crazy gun control mindset that I live in. But when I was saying to my students, what are the things that are important for you to have in preparation for a storm? And like all these kids are saying, a gun. I'm like, a gun, you know, because you're supposed to have things like water, blankets, flashlights. And the first thing they think of is a gun. I'm like, what do you need a gun for? To keep somebody from stealing your stuff. So,
wow.
You have to, and these were high school students. I was scared to ask the younger ones, what if they said the same thing? But we need to have a plan of action, like you said, Cheryl. And a lot of places that are hurricane areas, they do have some kind of mandate that you are supposed to follow. Sometimes it is just rebellion, where people down here don't want anyone telling them what to do, which is why we had fights and fallings out over wearing a mask in a store. I mean, like, you had crazy people. They don't, everything is a conspiracy. We don't want anybody telling us what to do. So they don't leave when they are told you're in zone blah 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 blah. This zone is going to be hit hard. We know it's coming in 2 days. Get out of here. And they sit there and go, I ain't going.
Well, we got to go now. But if you got anything out of this show, is that have a plan of action. Be prepared. If you know you live in a storm area, even if you don't, because fires can break out anywhere, always be ready and make friends or relatives or somebody in another city in case you have to really go far and you need to stay somewhere for a while. Just be ready to go and have a plan on how to get there. So until next time, and make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel and like us on Facebook so you can see us again next week, 5 p.m. Central, 6 p.m. Eastern, or wherever you are in the world, you can join us live. And until next time, I'm Naima.
I'm Cheryl.
And I'm Barbara. We are 3 safe Black moms.
Bye-bye.
I'm Barbara.
I'm Cheryl.
And I'm Naima. We're 3 Black moms.